Many of us cyclists will be used to using the National Cycle Network, and it's a fantastic network, mainly off-road but some on-road sections, and the custodians of that and the managers of that are Sustrans. Now, I think a lot of us take it for granted. It's there, it's always kept up to a good standard, maintained, but do we ever give a thought to the people that actually do that maintenance? And these people are actually volunteers, and my riding guest today is one of those volunteers. It's David. We're going to stop in a moment, have a chat with David. We'll have a talk about the sort of things they get up to as volunteers, and learn a bit more about Sustrans. So you're one of the volunteers for Sustrans, I believe, but you used to be the coordinator in the area, is that right?
Yeah, so I was a group coordinator for Grantham area.
Yeah.
So that kind of covered the NCN within the town.
Yeah.
And also out of town, so more particularly over in the west, where the NCN 15 feeds along the Grantham Canal and then along the old railway line. So just on the edge of the Beaver estate.
So I believe Sustrans started, what was it, in the 70s?
Yeah, so about 74, but you know, century 74. Yeah. So the UK was seeing a big peak crisis, oil peak crisis.
Right. Yeah, like now. Yeah.
Very much like now. So there was a collective group in Bristol, and they saw this problem, and they kind of come up with a solution of, well, we need to stop people relying more on cars and actually walk and cycle locally, walk to the shops, the schools. Mm-hmm. How can we do this? Well, we need to have routes, for them to do this. So one of the founders of Sustrans, John Grimshaw, he then convinced the government at the time to pass over the Bristol to Bath old railway. Mm-hmm. And over a certain amount of years they then created this long distance traffic free route from the both cities. And it was a huge success.
It's quite iconic, isn't it, that route?
It is very iconic.
So that was the very first one?
That, in a way, that was the very first one that really demonstrated that it could be done. And from that, they then went on and they did Transpennine Trail, and they concentrated more on the kind of long distance segments.
What, the old railways and that sort of thing?
The old railways, because obviously the old railways, they were then signed over to a new company called Roundpass Limited. So they were kind of the administrators of it. Mm-hmm. So they worked with Sustrans, and then over time things evolved, and then they expanded the network up to what it is today, which is well over 10,000 miles. That's across all countries of the UK, so that's Ireland, Scotland, Wales, and obviously here in England.
And how much of that is off-road?
There's about a third of it, so that is so when we talk about off-road, we talk about traffic-free.
Yeah.
So that can be a route that's alongside a road, and you're segregated from the traffic, so you're actually on a proper cycle path. It could be like here in Grantham, where we've got the Riverside Path.
And what's the criteria for a roadside path? Does it have to meet a standard?
The general core standard has been that a youngster, a student from about 12-year-old should be able to cycle the NCN So you know you have the first year secondary school students, they can cycle to school.
Yeah. I think we can tend to take Sustrans for granted sometimes. What's the future hold in store? I mean, have we done it all, or are Sustrans still engaged in developing cycling?
Oh, very much so. I mean, over the last possibly 5 years, there's been a lot of work of actually kind of standing back and actually looking at what we've been doing over the last sort of 20, 30, 40 years. And they've now looked, and obviously they've seen that in some areas the NCM may have developed too fast. Okay, so obviously they now want to kind of really make a blanket standard for the NCN, so they very much want to make it the best.
Right. So will that mean closing some of the unsuitable routes?
There may be some that may be closed, but that very much is an extreme case. You know, that's very much at the end of the flow chart. The first priority is obviously to keep a route open, and also because these routes, not only, you know, we talk about this huge distance. Yes, collectively there's big distance, but a mile of the NCN is just as important as 100 miles of the NCN.
And it's not just for cycling, is it? I think a lot of people think it's just cycling routes.
No, I mean obviously it's, you know, we're talking about the National Cycle Network, so obviously it's a brand, it's a name, you know, it's a name like you know, like Nike. What does Nike mean? It doesn't really mean anything. It's just a name. But no, it's, you know, we talk about what we want to talk about now is very much the NCM being there for everybody. So it's there for walkers, for cyclists, for dog walkers, you know, and it's very much there as a recreational use, so it's very much a multi-user route.
One thing I've heard people be quite concerned about is these motorised scooters. I mean, is there any limit to those using NCN routes, or is it open to them to use?
Well, I mean, obviously, as it stands in the UK, motorised scooters can only be used on private land, and as it is, there are some sections that are private land, but there's no given that these scooters can go on there. And it's just really more about the education that you know, when somebody purchases one of these products, that they need to be very much aware. You can only use these on private land by the permission of the owner.
We've got this enormous network that we've talked about, but that needs a lot of upkeep, and I understand that it's mainly volunteers that do this upkeep. Is that true?
Well, certainly the volunteers are the eyes and ears of the network. So that, as regard to the volunteers individually and as group and as pairs, they will do light maintenance, and they'll do sort of wildlife panting, so they'll do that along the route. And also, you know, we talk about as kind of the original volunteers. So you could say the original volunteers were the volunteer rangers, so we were there for the network. But you also have a stem off of volunteers. So you have volunteers that work in the active travel projects, and then you have volunteers that work in the offices. So it's a very huge broad range. As regards to the maintenance side of things, we regionally you have maintenance teams, and they will look after the routes that are on Sustrans owned pieces of land. So these are like the old railway lines, so that they have like Sustrans, just like any other landowner, like a council, they have a duty of care to the user, so that they have to very much make sure that the route is safe.
Yeah,
to use.
I think we probably take it all for granted. You know, we just see the blue signs, we follow them, enjoy it. Is there anything that we as users can do to help Sustrans in terms of you guys that look after the network?
Well, I mean, obviously, you know, we talked about, you know, the sort of maintenance. So, I mean, it might be a case of if you recently had some very, very high winds, like we tend to do at this time of year, and you may find yourself going on the route a day or two after, and if you saw a tree come down, you can kind of filter that information through to Sustrans. You know, you can go on the website and have a contact us section. So things like, you know, individually, things like that, and also, you know, if you saw a problem with a sign, or you know, if you felt if you rode part of the route, and if for some reason that you made a wrong turn, or you felt
The signage
should have been signed better, filter that through. Not only is David a Sustrans ranger, he also looks after this stretch of river, and being a river running through the town, there is a fair bit of rubbish, I would imagine, you pull out, David. A few supermarket trolleys, I guess. Yeah, well, yes, we get the odd one or two a year, definitely. But yeah, so I co-lead a project called River Care Beach Care.
Yeah.
So we're River Care Grantham, and we have a 1.8 mile stretch that we look after.
Right.
We've been running for 17 years now, and yeah, so I have a number of volunteers. We probably average 20-25 volunteers each let pick, and they're going out there. We're taking rubbish off the path, and then we also have a chap who actually works in the water, so we're taking the stuff out of the water. So I hope that's given you a bit more of an insight into what Sustrans do and how they support the NCN, the National Cycle Network. I've certainly learnt quite a bit from David. Apart from the things I've already said he does, he's also a great supporting member of our Grantham cycling infrastructure campaign, and David has for years been campaigning for better cycling infrastructure in the area, long before I came along. So he's a busy man, and as they say, if you want a job doing, get a busy man to do it. So thanks very much, David. Appreciate you joining me this morning, and keep up the good work. Thank you very much.